In 1927, the Boardwalk hires Warren Skip Littlefield. The championship swimmer, fresh out of Stanford University, is initially hired as the Seaside Company's first beach lifeguard. Before long, Skip picks up where Fred Swanton left off, ushering in a new era of boardwalk promotions. Skip had spent much of his youth on the Santa Cruz waterfront, held his first job there at age 11 as a pin boy in a ball pitch game. He had witnessed firsthand the publicity antics of Swanton and Swanton's successor, M.C. Hall.
He's a promoter. He's very much in the same mold as Fred Swanton. If you could take Fred Swanton and then you got Skip Littlefield. And he never missed an opportunity to take a picture with a woman in a bathing suit or with a huge fish or something. And his idea was, as always, to keep this place somewhere in the newspaper on the front page somehow. That's why we got so many good photographs. Great photographs.
Skip had a showman's flair. Skip, I think, could turn any moment into a photographic moment, you know, by how he propped it and how he did it and whatnot. He had that entrepreneurship in his blood, and he carried us, I mean, through the 30s and the 40s and the 50s.
He had a marvelous sense of humor, and I think especially he was a historian. He knew the lives and history of the people, like the music we played.
He was such a showman, of even when he retold the story. I'm sure the story got better with the retelling, too.
The Plunge water carnivals become one of Skip's claims to fame. Water carnivals in Santa Cruz actually date back to the late 1800s with the Venetian carnivals on the San Lorenzo River, adjacent to the boardwalk. In 1912, Fred Swanton revives the concept, moving the carnival to what is then known as Neptune Park at the last bend of the San Lorenzo River. The last outdoor carnival is held in 1927, but under Skip's reign as the boardwalk's publicity king, the excitement continues inside the Plunge.
Kid I went to school with, his sister was in the carnival. They called it the carnival. They had it every year. And the kids used to actually dive into the pool from the skylight. When they
that was way up
and
there.
that's quite high, you know.
I remember a guy named Clyde Devine, and Clyde used to stand in the rafters of the Plunge and then dive into the pool, right? I mean, it was nuts. And of course, everybody would crowd around to see him make a mistake. I mean, you don't pay money or come to see somebody do that just because he's going to do it. I mean, it's like watching a car race. You're kind of hoping something terrible is going to happen. Never did, I don't think. But yeah, I had guys flying on trapezes with, on fire, and I mean, it was wonderful. Just this wonderful sort of showmanship.
He had all sorts of wonderful athletes. In fact, Johnny Weissmuller, who had a cabin up in Ben Lomond, was one of the people who performed in the early Plunge water carnivals.
In addition to Weissmuller, Duke Kohanamoku, the Olympic and world swimming champion, considered the father of surfing, is the highlight of more than one Plunge show. And Ernest DeBatey, Ernest Kiff, and Don Bosco Patterson all perform what the Sentinel describes as a sensational, death-defying fire dive from the upper heights of the huge natatorium.
And Bosco would dive 70 feet into the water, and sometimes he would cover himself with grease and a protective layer of clothing underneath it and set the grease on fire, and then dive burning into the water.
The Plunge isn't the only place for these audacious feats. The beach also plays host to trapeze and other circus acts, water ski stunt shows, and parachuters, and what becomes known as the slide for life.
There was a cable that was attached to the top of the Pleasure Dome and then ran all the way down to the end of the Pleasure Pier. And there was a trapeze on a rolling trolley, and he would hang upside down on the cable and hold one of the young performers in his hands. And the kid would go through kind of somersaults while he hung onto both hands. And then just before they hit the end of the pleasure pier. He would let go, the kid would drop into the ocean, and then Bosco would dive. Because if they actually hit the end of the pier, they'd really be hurt because there was nothing to stop the motion of the trolley. And this was called the Slide for Life. And it just terrified the city council, and finally they passed a law saying no one younger than such and such an age can perform that stunt.
But not all attention-grabbing hijinks on the beach are dangerous.
Easter egg hunts at the boardwalk. I remember as a little child.
The Seaside Company would bury cans the night before Easter, and then all the kids in town would come around and they would dig the cans up the next day.
I think they let the little kids go first, and then the bigger ones got to go.
Masses of kids digging in the sand, out of control. It was fun.
You found a can, you'd take it up to the stage, and they would open it for you somehow, and you would find out what your prize was.
And if you got one of the lucky cans, it had a 25-cent piece in it. If not, it had one of the little toys that they give out at the different concessions.
I remember the biggest was a bicycle, which was a big deal way back then. And if you were lucky enough to find that can, I never did, but I mean, there were a lot of kids out here.
The Sentinel reports in March of 1937,
1,000 prizes will reward the kiddies and grown-ups who participate in Sunday's Easter egg hunt at Santa Cruz Casino Beach. Eggs buried in the sand will contain tickets good for prizes such as $5 admission books to the Santa Cruz Casino Plunge, free rides on the merry-go-round, dodge 'em, whip, and other amusements, and good things to eat and drink.
the Easter egg hunt is so popular that attendance at Sunday church services declines. The Boardwalk agrees to a request to move the event to Saturday. In 1934, the casino ballroom is renamed the Coconut Grove. And during the 30s through the mid-40s, the Coconut Grove is in its heyday, playing host to the biggest names in big bands, Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey, Artie Shaw, and Benny Goodman. San Jose native and bandleader Carl Brune, well known throughout California, is a regular on the Coconut Grove stage.
It was so exciting, the atmosphere which was created by the name bands. It was there were posters all over the boardwalk saying that Tommy Dorsey is here this week, or whatever it was. It was just an exciting thing to be part of it. It was the only major ballroom in Central California at that time. And it was a stopping off place. For example, if they would work the Hollywood Palladium one night, drive up the coast, play the Coconut Grove, and then go on to San Francisco or keep working north up to Portland and Seattle. If you were big in that era, you did it here, and the Coconut Grove was it, the place to be.
I remember going into the Coconut Grove with my parents. When I was quite small, they'd take me through to listen to some of the big bands, and it was pretty impressive.
Kay Kaiser, Tex Beneke, Xavier Cugat, and Lawrence Welk. People come to the Coconut Grove not just to listen to these bands and the popular music of the day, but also to dance.
Yeah, it was a dance pavilion, yeah. So you did it two ways. You either took your girlfriend or you found one at the dance. Hell of a thing to say, isn't it?
My dad used to drive me down to the dances, and when I was 16, and we had a lot of the men there were from Fort Ord Army Base, and of course, I pretended like I was so much older. I loved to dance.
Many, many evenings when you would see people dancing there and the lights were off and it was moonlight shining in on the floor of the ballroom floor. To see 2,000 or 3,000 couples dancing was quite an inspiring thing. And it was a memorable experience to see these beautifully gowned women doing the Viennese waltzes, the tango, and many other things.
At its height in the 30s and 40s, the era of big bands and ballroom dancing at the Coconut Grove lasts until the mid-1960s. In the summer of '64, Skip Littlefield records its demise in the Santa Cruz Sentinel.
The era of ballroom dancing twirls off the stage at Santa Cruz Beach. Quietly and without fanfare, Coconut Grove Ballroom on the beach at Santa Cruz came to the end of an era last Saturday night.
In the 60s, vocalists Nat King Cole, Sonny and Cher, the New Christie Minstrels, and the Four Freshmen are among the many top-name acts that perform at the Grove. And in 1977, it's Les Brown and his band of renown on stage as part of a resurgence in big band music. The Coconut Grove is not the only venue for music at the Boardwalk. Music has been a staple of entertainment on the beach itself since the late 1800s, when the Hastings Band of Santa Cruz played there. Carl Brun is part of the Santa Cruz Symphonic Band, playing weekly concerts on the beach bandstand.
The beach was haven, if you will, for music, all kinds of music. There was a symphonic beach band that played every Sunday on the beach, and it played for large crowds because in those years, the beach was a very popular thing where people could come and listen to this type of music.
And while the beach bandstand has changed more than once, and the roster of band names may be different each year, the tradition of music on the beach is something that continues to this day.
Well, there's very few venues left like this. You know, it's a unique thing. It has the spirit of another age, doesn't it? So you come and you feel like for the time that you're on stage, that you're in another generation, really. Because if you look, I mean, if you look from the stage, it looks like a much smaller world than it is. You can see everybody in the audience. There's lots of fun people and lots of like odd people, and there's families, and it's kind of unique.
On the beach here, this is one of the most incredible shows because every time I play it, even when we do 2 shows, I mean, it's still packed. It's got a bit of a hippie feel to it, you know, and being that I'm all hippie, I love that, you know. It's a great place to do a show because it's got that real free feeling, you know. You're out on the beach and the summer air and the roller coaster going by. And
we know all these people. These are 7,000 of our closest friends.
I see people that I went to high school with I haven't seen in, you know, almost 40 years. So it's kind of neat to run it. And they've got families and grandchildren now. You know, I remember you was, you know, 3rd period science class, you know, way back. So it's kind of neat, these old friends and family here.
Plus, being a band for so long, you know, it's nice to be friends with all the guys in the group and then see all of our friends out here. It's really a sweet notion.
Greg Kinn Band in Santa Cruz have had a love affair now for a long time. It's got to be a million years. We've been doing this since the early Paleozoic era, since the Cretaceous period.
The cave train, you know,
Uh-huh. We were here when it was a real cave.
While the Giant Dipper and the merry-go-round always rank among the top rides on anyone's list of favorites, there are other rides that bring back sweet memories for Boardwalk regulars.
Down near the end of the boardwalk, they had little cars that you tried to drive, and they were, well, I think if you turn, as I recall, if you turned the steering wheel one way, the car would go the other way.
I used to come down with my friends and torture them, you know. I wouldn't warn them about, like the Rocco plane, you know. You get on, I'd tell them, okay, you pull back on this metal bar, and as long as you pull back, it won't go upside down. Well, it was just the opposite. So they'd pull back, and we get to the top, and I'd say, okay, well, let go now, and then you'd swing, you know, back and forth, and everybody would scream and lose their change. And
I remember riding Bulgy the Whale as a child, as I'm sure a lot of people do, and then went through having my kids on it, and now they're too big for Bulgy, and Bulgy is still here. So that will always be one of my favorites as well.
We used to have a ride here called the Flying Cages. There were 4 cages, and you would get in, And for whatever the time was, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, you got to pump that cage. You could get that thing going really fast, even almost dangerously fast. And we'd have contests. And how many revolutions could you do in this cage in the time allotted?
They used to have a ride called the Rolo plane. It was sort of like a little cage, and it turned upside down, and I was on it when it turned upside down, and there we were just hanging there for a few minutes, and I got sick to my stomach. Well, you know the rest of the story. They had to stop the ride and get me off.
The bumper cars were the most fun in the old days because they were not a complete track the way it is now. You could go through, you could take a shortcut and bump people, and I remember just laughing so hard.
Well, people get on the cars, and it's funny. You've got all these serious people that walk into the bumper cars, and the bell rings, and all these people go, you know.
Let me tell you about the Haunted Mansion. The kids that they'd hired to run it used to hide inside, and they'd jump on your car, and they'd take wet spaghetti and zip it over your head. Oh, you'd be screaming the whole way, and then they'd back off your car before the car went out again. But they were awful. They used feathers, they used all kinds of things. They wouldn't hurt you ever, but it was scary, man, because you're waiting, you just don't know.
My favorite ride was called the Octopus. It swung you around and around and it went up and down, and then the individual cars would twirl at the same time. And when you swung around towards the ocean, it seemed like if it came loose, they'd flip you all the way out into the bay.
The other ride I really have always liked is the Ferris wheel. There's just something about riding the Ferris wheel at night when you can see the lights on the wharf and the lights over the boardwalk and the lights in the city of Santa Cruz.
And one ride that rivals the Giant Dipper on the fear factor scale is the Wild Mouse. The Wild Mouse, a mini coaster ride imported from Germany and constructed in 1958, is promoted as the most sensational ride of the century.
So fast and so scary. It just went, and I thought, no, I'm not going to do it.
It was scary because you went right up that hill, and then you started going and you went right for this corner, and then boom, turned around. When you're up there and you're on that little track and you think you're going right over the edge and you're going fast, and then those little hills, yeah, that was sweet.
You go on two wheels and that little bit of give always, you thought you were going over, but
Yeah, if you felt like you were falling off, they're going to throw you out of the little cars and they're going to snap off those turns and dump you on the rocks.
During the 40s, World War II affects the boardwalk in several ways. The Casa del Rey Hotel is converted to a naval hospital. The Plunge is used for rehabilitation and for teaching servicemen to swim. In an attempt to prevent an attack by the Japanese, blackout curtains that mask interior lights are draped from one end of the boardwalk to the other. Dim outs make night operation of the boardwalk nearly impossible, and nighttime travel on the Coast Highway is banned. The Miss California pageant is canceled. And with war rations and a sluggish economy, tourism as a whole declines.
It changed considerably during World War II because Santa Cruz became a major port of call for sailors on leave. A lot of the spook house rides and penny arcade attractions started to get a little blue. Not so blue that a kid couldn't accidentally look in and see that it was rather tame stuff, but maybe blue for that day.
When World War II is over, the Suntan Special, which didn't run during the war, arrives again at the boardwalk.
Well, the Suntan Special was a passenger train that came down from San Francisco, and it stopped along the way to pick up people to spend the day at the beach.
And they called it the Suntan Special because everybody who took it would come back with suntans.
The Suntan Special actually started operating in 1927. In that year, it ran only 4 times, traveling the 34 miles from San Jose to Santa Cruz, up through the Redwoods, and through a half-dozen tunnels. By 1929, it was running every Sunday, up until the start of World War II. Then on July 4th, 1947, the first Suntan Special in over 5 years stops at the beach.
Being that we lived a block up Riverside Avenue, we used to hear it come in every weekend. The band would start playing, you know, music, and we'd run down there and just watch the people. It came from San Francisco, and you get a lot of people real dressed up. You know, people in San Francisco love to get dressed up then. So we just listen and watch and enjoy it.
Sometimes there'd be more than one train. Sometimes they'd run special excursion trains for one group or another. And I can remember one time where there's a picture that shows 4 or 5 trains in the depot.
Promoting the Suntan Special falls into the hands of Skip Littlefield. His idea, to use a young, beautiful woman to entice people to take the train to Santa Cruz. One of the lucky women chosen as Miss Suntan Special is Marilyn Matthews.
For 2 years, I did different modeling for the beach, and one of which was taken down at Natural Bridges. They wanted me in a bikini. Well, we didn't wear bikinis then. I went to Marini's on the boardwalk and borrowed a 2-piece suit, and the only one that would fit was a leopard skin. And then I bought shoelaces. So the day of the shoot, I tied the shoelaces to the sides and had to pull the bathing suit way down. It was pretty risque.
While Suntan Special trains no longer journey over the hill to Santa Cruz, going by train through the Redwoods to the boardwalk is still possible, even today. The Santa Cruz Big Trees and Pacific Railway Company's Suntan Specials arrive twice each day, all summer long, traveling from Felton's Roaring Camp non-stop to the beach. The 40s and 50s bring another thrilling attraction to the beach, the Stagnaro Speedboat rides at the end of the Pleasure Pier.
Well, the Stagnaros used to run the speedboat tours off the end of the old pier. Stago used to run them, drive them, Stago, Stagnaro, and he'd drive by in the morning at 8 o'clock and yell to my dad over his microphone, who would be here making caramel corn at 7 in the morning, and he'd yell to him and wish him good morning as he was cruising on the bay in the mornings. That was kind of fun.
We'd go down there probably maybe once a week, go out on a speedboat ride. That's the big old speedboat they called the Stag.
Gorgeous boat made out of wood, you know, and he'd just fly through the ocean.
You'd hear the loudspeaker say, fast, thrilling speedboat rides going right out at the end of the pier.
We all knew it by heart.
Yeah, they
because
would.
they kept saying,
yeah,
hi-de-ho, and away they go.
Yeah, everybody remembers hi-de-ho and away we go.
Hi-de-ho and away they go!
That was over a microphone, and so everyone on the beach and everyone on the boardwalk could hear that. So that was something that drew them out there.
You go all the way out to Seal Rock, past the steamer's lane, and make it pass, go all the way out to Capitola and come back again. That was the ride.
Despite the many attractions at the beach, the post-war era is difficult on the boardwalk and on Santa Cruz in general.
Santa Cruz really slipped out of the mainstream of a lot of what was going on in California. And in the 1950s, Santa Cruz was pretty quiet. Dead might be a word we would use. In fact, Herb Cain coined a phrase, nearly deads and newlyweds. People came here to retire, or you came here on your honeymoon.
The park was really run down. Like most of the parks of our vintage, we went through the war, there was very little maintenance done, and coming out of the war, there was not a lot of traffic.
In 1951, the Seaside Company is delivered a tragic blow. Lewis Jenkins, the president of the company, dies unexpectedly.
One of the 3 fellows that had a controlling interest, the other gentleman had moved to New York.
The future management of the company is suddenly in question. One of the members of the Seaside Company's board of directors is Lawrence Canfield.
I remember I was 12 years old when he came home, told my mother, I don't know who's going to run the park. It was a real struggle for my father, and he said, well, my sister's new husband was coming up in the insurance business, just graduating from Stanford. He said, I think I'm going to just step out of the insurance, let him run that, and move down and run the park.
He had vision and he had foresight, and he wanted the place to remain viable for the long term. And he set about creating parking. He began to buy land for parking purposes. And then he had that lower end area built, allowed us to put in the Cave Train ride and the Autorama car ride.
And he was just a good businessman. He knew what needed to be done to have the park survive.
Many credit the boardwalk's survival to Lawrence Canfield. Parking lots, new rides, security, a focus on bringing families to the park. Under his watchful eye, the Seaside Company reinvests in the boardwalk, expanding it through the 50s and 60s, allowing it to succeed, while other parks along the coast close.
He'd walk the walk, but he wouldn't stop and talk to anybody. And you didn't know if he was out checking things out or what he was looking for. And there was this aura about him that, you know, careful, he's on the walk, make sure you're doing everything right. A very reserved man, I think a very astute businessman, certainly very committed to the place. As I got to know him later, funny guy, great sense of humor, very dry, wry sense of humor.
One of the features of the walk when Lawrence takes over is that it's truly a boardwalk.
When there were boards here, you had to pay attention. I remember some horrible slivers from down there fooling around, running around on the boardwalk.
We go under the boardwalk, because it truly was a boardwalk, and look for coins. You always find a lot of pennies. Forget about the penny arcade. So then we go to the penny arcade and put them all back in the machines and start the whole cycle over again next week.
As a young kid, I remember the boardwalk, which was really a boardwalk. It was wood.
Worn, cracks.
And we used
you
to
could see people down
go
below.
barefooted too. You know, we didn't have sandals or thongs or anything back then.
That's right.
One thing I do remember is burning my feet on cigarettes. It was terrible because they would stick in the cracks. You'd be barefooted and step on a lit cigarette and it sticks to your foot. Run out there and stick it in the water.
In the mid-1950s, Lawrence makes one of his first renovations, replacing the boards of the boardwalk with concrete. One of the big attractions during the 50s and 60s is the Fun House.
Funhouse had this big clown head that you could walk through the open mouth.
I remember you could wiggle the teeth. There were a couple of loose teeth, and if you wiggled good, you could pull one out.
When you walked in, it had mirrors that were all warped, and they actually still have a few of them here at the boardwalk. And so you can make yourself tall or fat or little on the top, big on the bottom.
And you'd stand in front of the mirror, and some guy would press the air thing and whoop, right up your skirt. You know?
And then they had this long walkway that, you know, was like being on the ocean, where it just kind of went like a wave, you know, go like this and then back and like that. And then you had to walk, so you've just like walking like this the whole time.
Those waves in there were treacherous. Those pipes going back and forth, and you're trying to grab as you go along.
You'd walk up these things, it moved all the time, you know. And you'd walk up, and then you'd have to wait to step down, or you'd step down, the one behind you would go up.
And you had to watch when you go from one to the other that you kind of jump over, because otherwise you get your fingers squashed between the metal bars, which, you know, wasn't too thrilling. So you learned how to do that. You learned how to kind of, and boop, onto the next one, boop, onto the next one.
The big feature in the middle of the fun house was this enormous slide with 3 humps in it that went, I think, 4 stories in the sky.
You would run up the stairs and you'd carry this burlap sack with you, and you would jump on this slide and you would just go all the way down.
And then if you lost your gunny sack, you know, you get a road burn on your leg because there's nothing you could do but keep going.
It also had in it a barrel, and that barrel was designed to take you off balance. And we spent, as kids, at least I did, spend so much time in the funhouse, it was kind of like a babysitting service for my parents, that I could not, if I tried, fall over in that barrel. It was just became second nature to walk through this spinning tube.
I could walk the barrel backwards and forwards while my friends would roll all around. But the secret to that was you couldn't look at the barrel, you had to look out. So, and here I jumped and turned around, walked backwards, and they'd be rolling all around in there.
And the thing was spinning like this constantly. So, you know, some people, you know, had no coordination. As soon as they start walking it, whack! You know, they'd go down and they'd take everybody else out with them because they'd just start running people through it. So everybody'd go down.
When you were with a gang, you know, with a whole group of kids, you know, somebody would fall on purpose, you know. Some dumb guy, you know. And then everybody be in this great big puddle trying to climb out of the...
Or the biggest thrill was probably the circle that used to spin real fast.
They'd open up the gates and all the kids would run into the middle of this disc.
And then it starts spinning real fast, and then people would just start flying off.
Flying into the wall at high rates of speed.
It was like King of the Mountain, essentially. So people would just start shoving each other off of it, and the thing would start going really fast, and they had it all padded around it. So guys would just go zoom right off of it. And it was pretty fun.
Obviously, the one in the center got to stay on the longest. But if the ones on the outside all knew what was going on, we'd all lock hands at the last minute, and then you just drag everybody off of the wheel.
I can remember going on there with Darlene. It was always kind of fun giving her a little push, you know, because then I'd always be the last one on and she'd fall off first. That was good fun, too.
Now you see why we got a divorce after 30 years. Now you know.
You could go in there, pay to go in, and stay all day.
Our parents loved it, because like my folks would come over and they would put my brother and sister and I in there, and then they would say, don't come out of here until 5 o'clock. And then they go have a drink, sit on the wharf, you know, have a good time.
In the late 50s and early 60s, as Lawrence Canfield works through his long-term plan to revitalize the boardwalk, Santa Cruz gets a boost from another phenomenon sweeping the country.
Then the surf culture took over, the beach craze, the Beach Boys of surf music and all that. And suddenly the beach became more of a thing. We had the cruisers on Beach Street. The beach itself, the boardwalk itself, more vitality to it.
Surfing then was really strong because it came out of the Gidget era, and you know, in the late 50s, and people from the Midwest, you know, they're still thinking of California surf craze. So when those people came here, they wanted to take surf lessons.
Cowell's Beach is one of the best beginning beaches to surf anywhere. It has better waves than Waikiki most of the time.
Surfing in Santa Cruz actually dates back to the 1800s and gains momentum in the mid-30s when a group of local teenagers learned the basics of board building and surfing. It's also during the 30s that Duke Kahanamoku, the father of modern surfing, used his fame to promote surfing throughout the U.S. and performed at the Plunge.
The first surfing started in the 1800s with Prince David, and that was right there at Rivermouth. I grew up on Cowell's Beach here, and then surfed there, then body surfed there at Rivermouth. Rivermouth, during the 50s and 60s, were all the heavies. You know, you had the big boys. I was just the Grom, and so in order to get into that pecking order, you know, they were like, kid, you don't belong out here, okay? So on the really small days, I would surf right off that point, going right up the river with my board. You could go right up the river and surf, and it was never crowded there.
You would just free fall into like 10 or 12 feet of water off these huge waves. It was so much fun. You'd go underwater for a while and it'd wash you around, and it was sweet.
The 60s is a decade of great change for the boardwalk and for Santa Cruz in general. A seawall is constructed in 1960 near the San Lorenzo River. It's the first phase of a $1 million 2-acre renovation at the river end of the walk, which includes the addition of the cave train to the Lost World, Dinosaur Lake with Dangerous Dan the Dinosaur, and the Autorama, all of which open in 1961. The Sentinel calls the Autorama modernistic and describes the cave train as combining the drama of the unknown with the fun of an old-fashioned train ride.
And those were the new style of rides that were becoming popular that Disney had initiated.
In March of 1963, Walt Disney himself visits the boardwalk to check out the Santa Cruz version of the Autorama ride.
I remember I was working a hamburger stand way down by the river. The entourage, there were maybe 8, 10 people, were coming down the walk and went down to look at this ride. But I think I recognized at the time who I thought was Walt Disney, and I was satisfied that I had seen Walt Disney. Well, the story is that the Seaside Company management planned then, once he did this, to go out and have lunch at a nice restaurant, I think out in the Wharf or somewhere. But when the idea of lunch was presented to him, he said, oh, no, let's just grab a hamburger close by and whatever. So here I am working this hamburger stand all by myself. It wasn't busy. And all of a sudden, standing in front of me at the counter was Walt Disney, with clustered around, 7 or 8 other people, all ordering hamburgers, fries, coffee, soft drinks, or whatever. So I served Walt Disney a hamburger, and I think it was a pretty good one, too.
In 1963, the new bandstand is erected, and the Plunge is filled in. The space that once played host to amazing water carnivals, where generations of Santa Cruz residents learned to swim, is converted into a miniature golf course. This also marks the end of the Pleasure Pier. In 1964, the Santa Cruz Yacht Harbor is constructed, forever changing the main beach in front of the boardwalk.
The waves used to break up on the boardwalk steps down here because the jetty wasn't in at that time. Big shore break waves would come in and break right on the steps. I mean, it was magnificent, and boats would wash up.
Above the city, the University of California at Santa Cruz opens in 1965, giving the city a year-round population boost. No longer are the streets of Santa Cruz deserted through the winter. And on the boardwalk, the Sky Glider is installed in 1967. It's the first major ride addition to the boardwalk in 6 years.
The Sky Glider, Santa Cruz's newest attraction for you, your family, for everyone. The Sky Glider, a spectacular trip along the blue Pacific shore. See the sparkling waters and lush green Santa Cruz mountains. A view as you've never seen it before. A ride to enjoy again and again.
In the 70s, transformation continues. The beloved funhouse is torn down in 1971. And in 1972, the boardwalk adds the German-made Jetstar, with bobsled-type cars similar to those of Disneyland's Matterhorn. The Jetstar is like a giant pretzel with banked, almost vertical curves and turns. In 1976, the boardwalk celebrates its 20 millionth Dipper rider. And 1 year later opens Logger's Revenge, replacing the Wild Mouse.
When Great America opened in the 70s, we thought we were at a disadvantage because we didn't have a water ride. So we worked with Aero Development and designed and built the ride that's here today, which it's not as big as the ones over there, but it did give us the advantage of having a water ride.
In addition to the ongoing upgrades on the walk itself, the Seaside Company also continues to invest in the Coconut Grove, whose legacy dates back to 1907.
But if you look, you'll find little writings, such and such was here, 1907, such and such was here, 1923. There's actually, if you really look closely at a lot of the walls and in some of the hidden areas that have been untouched for many years, there's actually little bits of history and stuff. But these are pretty much well original as they were built. There hasn't been any remodel in this area. 1906 to can't quite make it out, and then 1907 to 1914. Flutist. So that's somebody who used to play here.
The benefactor of numerous remodels over the years, the Grove receives its most serious makeover in 1981 at a cost of nearly $10 million. The restoration project includes an update and expansion of the kitchen and interior, and the return of the building's exterior to its turn-of-the-century charm. The premier attraction of the renovation is the sunroom, a 6,000 square foot space with a massive retractable glass ceiling. During the day, it's bright and colorful with a breathtaking view of Monterey Bay. And at night, its soft lighting evokes the elegance of yesteryear, when the adjoining ballroom was alive with the sounds of all the big band greats. In 1984, another major change in management happens at the Seaside Company. Charles Canfield, a vice president since 1967, takes over as president when his father, Lawrence Canfield, passes away. Carrying on his father's vision, Charles continues to innovate and renovate, aggressively adding new rides and attractions, always focused on family fun and entertainment. And today, Charles works closely with his own son, Tom, ensuring that the Boardwalk's vision continues. The promotional torch, lit by Fred Swanton and passed to Skip Littlefield, is handed off to General Manager Ed Hutton and then Director of Marketing, Mark Lipton. In 1980, the promotion is all about the green. Vegetables, that is.
This area here grows 90% of the Brussels sprouts that are grown in the world. Why wasn't there a festival for the Brussels sprout? With tongue-in-cheek, we moved forward and did a Brussels sprout festival. We received international press, all from around the world, people wanting to talk about it. Why would anyone have a Brussels sprout festival?
The Brussels Sprouts Festival runs for 12 years, complete with gourmet sprout tastings, cooking demonstrations, and a Brussels sprouts cookbook. The Brussels Sprouts Festival is just one of the creative promotions launched to draw people to the beach year-round. Suntan contests, strongman and female bodybuilder contests, crawdad races, beach games, ice skating at the beach, a soap opera festival, Friday night bands on the beach, and the annual clam chowder cook-offs all have their place in Boardwalk history. And just in time for Easter week 1986, Popeye and his family arrive in Santa Cruz. The world-famous sailor makes his entrance, by boat, of course.
My favorite promotion is 1907 Nights, because it's such a simple promotion. And it came about of what we were going to do for the 75th anniversary.
1907 Nights begins with 25-cent rides, drinks, hot dogs, and cotton candy.
And we did it in the best tradition of old-time promoters. We were planning, if it worked, to have 1907 Nights go through the entire summer. But for the first one, what we implied is it was only one night. And we got such a good reaction, we said, we're going to do it a second night, backed by popular demand. And then after the second night, we said, the public has spoken. We're going to do it all summer long.
In 1987, the Boardwalk celebrates its 80th year. And to make the celebration all the more special, the Giant Dipper and merry-go-round are both named National Historic Landmarks. Then, On October 17, 1989, the 7.1 Loma Prieta earthquake hits. The epicenter is only 10 miles from the boardwalk. The Casa del Rey Hotel, now a senior housing facility, but once a major tourist destination, is irreparably damaged.
I was at the Casa del Rey at the time, and the whole place had to go down. I remember walking through the building right after the earthquake, and you could see daylight through the courtyard area. You could see the walls had just gone away from the floor about 6 inches. You could see the outside of the building.
The boardwalk needs repairs as well. The toppled beach bandstand is removed, and damage to the exterior wall of the Plunge building is significant. But this only speeds plans to transform the facility into a year-round amusement experience. The theme-oriented Neptune's Kingdom opens 18 months after the earthquake. It's full of the latest video games and a renovated miniature golf course.
In front of the sun, there's only one place to be. Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk's the one for my buddies, my family, and me. The rides are hot and boring. There's just so much to do. So if you're looking for me, day or night, you'll find me in Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk.
Under Charles Canfield's lead, the 1990s start off with a storm of new rides. In 1992, the Hurricane, with its 80-degree banking turns, makes its debut as the 5th coaster in the boardwalk's history. And down the walk from the Hurricane, the Typhoon makes landfall. It's just the start of a decade of renovation and innovation. Laser tag, whirlwind, chaos, tsunami. Something new, always combined with the tried and true. A great example of the tried and true is the boardwalk's cave train.
We were going to take out the cave train. It's been there long enough. We wanted something new. Oh, the letters, the calls for people telling us we can't possibly take out the cave train. What are we doing? We have to keep the cave train.
Well, wait a minute. Maybe we better just modernize it a bit and leave it a little funky, and people really like it. You know, not everything has to be just perfect. And I think it's just the ability to go into the dark and be entertained by some goofy gags that people really enjoy.
I probably get in trouble for telling this story, but I remember when I was a ride operator, I used to work in that area, and the cave train goes in a big loop, actually. So if you're riding the back of the train, you can jump off, and you can run over, and you could catch the back of the train again. Enough time so that you could run over, run into the stone room, and you could be one of the stone men or stone women, and you'd be drinking beer. And people on their train would go.
Did you do it?
Oh, I did it all the time. Oh, yeah, I did that. I did do that. It was really fun. And you would always make the person who was running the train crack up because they didn't expect to see you there, and you'd just be hoisting your beer.
The Boardwalk's Cave Train 2000 adventure leads the boardwalk into the 21st century. Other rides added since then include Fireball and Cliffhanger, Fright Walk, and most recently, the 125-foot-tall Double Shot.
I think that the boardwalk just has a sort of romanticism about it. There's just nothing like it. I mean, Disneyland's a great place, Great America's a great place, but they're just kind of manufactured. The boardwalk is really natural. It sits right on a beach in one of the most pristine bays in all of the world. You can hear the waves crashing, you can hear the music, the screams on the Giant Dipper, and now the Double Shot. And there's just nothing like it. You couldn't recreate this anywhere in the world if you tried.
Over the years, the uniqueness of the boardwalk has drawn filmmakers of all genres. Santa Cruz and the boardwalk have been seen as a backdrop in many films.
Lost Boys, that was of Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That's another favorite and interesting movie. Sting 2, Sudden Impact, countless commercials. If people are looking to create an environment that could be 1920s, could be 1930s, could be 1950s, 60s, 70s, or even modern day. They can come here.
There's nothing like being down here early in the morning sometimes when it's not crowded and you can just kind of take a walk around and smell the smell of the ocean and really see the park up close, and just such an entwined part of my life, just who we are.
It's a perfect composition, a perfect balance of where we're located, we're in a natural setting, how the rides are dispersed, the colors, buildings.
It's really an ideal setting for an amusement park.
I think this is one of the great undiscovered local treasures.
Coming right here on the boardwalk, it's when days like this, it's just, you know, it's almost magical.
It's shocking to me as you go around the country how many people know what the boardwalk is, have been here, and have their own boardwalk story to tell.
Stories that span 100 years and involve millions of memories.
People have really fond memories of the place. They have really wonderful memories of coming here. For generations and generations. I have pictures of my grandmother and my grandfather in 1917 here at the boardwalk. People, they have a lot of ownership of this park, which is very sweet.